Greetings from Costa Rica, folks, and thank you very much for joining me today for our May Costa Rica real estate market report here, adding in a little background music to our typical Friday broadcasts to make things even more enjoyable here. My worldwide enormous following of Costa Rica, Matt. Thanks very much for joining me. Today, we're going to go from north to south, all the way from Playas del Coco down to Nosara and down to Jaco, with resident experts in each area to give you reports on what is happening in those real estate markets here as of May 24. It's an important month. May is when the high season for tourism has ended here in Guanacaste and in most of Costa Rica. And from January through April, you also saw the biggest amount of real estate clients visiting the country. Usually it's the time of year when you see the most deals go under contract because there are just such a large volume of people visiting. So today we want to talk to people from around the country. We're going to go with Cynthia Ureña up in Playas del Coco, Joe Gibson from Nosara, and finally David Karr down in Jaco. All of them amazing experts in their local markets to get their thoughts on how things looked over the last 4 months, how that compared to 22 and 23, and any news that they think will really affect their market here for the rest of the year. Before I get too lost rambling on, let me just get to the point here. By the way, I do have an organized real estate videos playlist. You can hold your phone up to the screen just like this and look at this QR code with your camera. This will take you to my ultimate real estate playlist with the most informational videos that I have, possibly also some of the most boring videos, but definitely worth checking out if you are interested in investing here. You can also email me at matt@costaricamat.com. And as always, be sure to subscribe. I now have 406 videos. I should update this little graphic here. I've got a spot right behind me. That's where my 100,000 subscriber plaque is going to go, folks. I hope it's the right size, but it's just a blank hole with the phone right now. If you subscribe, you can help me to get up to that 100,000. So let's start talking about the Costa Rica real estate market here and bring in our first expert from Playas del Coco. We are joined now by Cynthia Ureña, who has been in Playas del Coco for how many years in the real estate industry up there?
Hi, Matt. How are you?
Very well, thanks. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be part of this.
Absolutely. How long have you been in real estate in Coco?
I have been doing real estate for 10 years now. Started with the family of Coco Banker, as you know, and now I'm with another company.
But yeah, even though Cynthia broke our hearts, she remains one of the top experts. She's always collaborative. We work together, and she's been on my channel before. So I'm going to sit back and relax and just sort of let you take things, Cynthia. Tell us, how has the market been in Coco here over this high season, January to May of 24? What sorts of things are you seeing? And cheers.
Cheers. Our market has been very good. It was very good. We have a very good high season. And compared to the last 2 years, 22 and 23, people were still moved by the feelings from COVID. They were anxious to get out, and they were coming down and staying here and fall in love. The same thing happened this year, and I find that this year people were more they were not planning as much. They fall in love while they were here. Yes.
Okay.
Before we have people inquiring months ahead, months before they come here. But this year we had a different behavior. Yes.
Now, do you think that's partially because, I imagine people in 2020 were doing nothing but planning, and maybe they still sort of had planning time left over following the pandemic. Do you think this past high season in cocoa, was it as strong as that 2022 post-pandemic rush, or have things slacked off a little?
We were running out of inventory. Most of our inventory sold during the last years. So this year we have less inventory available, which is changing now. It's changing, but a lot of projects are still under construction. So we have to wait until they're more advanced to
Yeah.
make that step. Yes.
And let me ask, so in cocoa this past year, what sort of inventory was, or what is being built right now that we'll see coming on the market going forward over the next year or so?
Several towers with condos, which we don't have any of those, other than a 4-story building in Pacifico. But there are several towers coming with more stories and more condos, ranging from 200 to 700,000, and
How
also
tall would those towers be?
5 stories and one. I don't know. They said it's going to be 10 stories.
Okay, so we're still not talking about mega skyscrapers. We're talking 5, maybe 10 stories up there. Are those
Yeah.
going to be directly on the water in cocoa?
No, there will be walking distance to the beach, but not on the water.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that's great to hear. The lack of inventory there is always, it's just a good sign that there's a balance between buyers and sellers. Did cocoa go through years of the same sort of construction restrictions that we saw down south because of water issues or the lack of new water letters?
Yes, absolutely. And that is changing now. There's a lot of construction going on. Our luxury market is also increasing, with Waldorf Astoria being built, announced to be open in November. I was looking on their website and they're taking reservations now. And one night I staying there will be $2,500 a night. So people,
$2,500 a night.
yeah, so people can pay that,
Oh man, no, absolutely. It's a complete new thing in Costa Rica. If you're watching my channel currently and you're interested in the Waldorf Astoria, I'd love to tour it again. They actually have an amazing sales program where if you've got a client looking at one of their properties, at times they'll pick you up in a boat and take you on a tour so that you can see the whole site. But you see those luxury projects going in, you're going to have, Papagayo is filling up. They've added now the Ritz-Carlton residences and all those condos are finished.
Yes.
And now you're going to have that, the one and only there on the other side of the bay as well, which is supposed to be ultra luxury, really high end. So
6 stars, 7 stars,
6-star, absolutely. And well, personally, 6 stars doesn't impress me very much because I have a 10-star YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
But it's good for them. I know that with 6 stars, they must have a very nice hotel.
Yes.
It's great to hear from you, Cynthia. I'm glad things are very strong in cocoa overall.
Yes.
And I always appreciate you joining my channel.
Oh,
Let me ask you a random question now. If you were a buyer looking up in your area right now, and let's say you had that $500,000 budget or, $400,000 to $500,000, what's your absolute top pick for a cocoa condo right now?
a beachfront condo. There are
You
very
can
few,
get beachfront 400 to 500.
very very few left. Yes, and you can still
In
find.
fact,
And might be
I was
your.
going to say, one of our common clients just recently landed, and she is a dedicated YouTube follower. So I wanted to make a shout out to Paula and Bruce.
Yeah.
Congratulations on closing on your beachfront condo.
Yeah, and I'm very happy for them. Yes.
Absolutely. Thanks very much for joining the show, Cynthia. We're going to take our geographical trip a little bit further south now. Have a great weekend.
You too.
Absolutely. Next, folks, we're heading south to Nosara, though the person, Joe Gibson, who is owner-broker of Surfing Nosara, the Coldwell Banker brokerage down there, is actually currently joining us from the scenic hills of somewhere in Italy. Thank you very much for coming in despite being on an awesome vacation, Joe.
Oh, I'm happy to join you, Matt. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Tell us about the Nosara market in 24 so far. First of all, your brokerage has obviously been doing extremely well based on the national Coldwell results. Congrats on being the highest volume brokerage in the country. Tell me about this season 24. How did it look in Nosara?
Yeah, 24 was interesting. You know, what I've tried to really drive towards now is to drop the post-COVID market from our vocabulary. I think everyone is still referencing that post-COVID sort of just craziness that went on. And everyone wants to look back at that and wonder why it's not still happening. And I think it's important that we remember that was never a healthy market. That was never realistic. It was driven by factors that we've never seen before and we'll never see again. So that's my rant. I'm going to leave that alone. 2024, with that in mind, was a very healthy market. It was very similar to an 18-19 high season, with some differences. This year we actually surpassed the 1.5 million as our average sales price, which was fantastic, obviously. But yeah, it says a lot. It says a lot about what's happening.
I gotta move. Oh man. I don't even want to tell you my average sales price of the kind.
Yeah, it's a blessing and a curse, right? And we all recognize that. Inventory levels, as Cynthia was just talking about, we actually are seeing inventory levels sort of recover and go back to a healthy inventory level. That being said, as is always the case, this is my 24th year in real estate. As is always the case in real estate, if it's priced right, it's going to move. And I think there are unfortunately some properties that were caught in the changeover, the slowdown. As we talk about in the office, we haven't seen properties that have decreased in value. What we've just seen is a slowdown in appreciation. So I think if sellers listen to their expert real estate agents that they're hopefully using, they can price right and they can still move properties and they can still make money. We have a number of properties that actually were flipped inside of a 6-month period. They made a nice 10% plus profit on those. So, there's still a lot of money to be made even in a short-term investment.
Yeah. I've so wonderfully chosen this spot north of Nosara to make my business. Hearing 6-month flips and 10% gains, that's not common here in Junquillal. Only you see that once in a miraculous while. Obviously for my audience, if you haven't followed the nuances of Guanacaste real estate, obviously Nosara is a place that exploded. And one of the things that you mentioned that I also can identify with this year, also feeling like that 2018, 2019 solid year. Yeah, the pandemic happened. We had people jumping off planes and buying properties with no logic whatsoever. Now we're back to that dynamic that felt very solid. Finally, Costa Rica the real estate market here had recovered from the devastating 2010 meltdown. And we're really back at that. Yeah, I mean, this is way better than those dead years from 11 to 17, but it was no frenzied, emotional, overbuying kind of circumstance. So congratulations for being somebody who says that it was unhealthy back then, because I agree. And I've also felt like this high season, what I saw was the sellers still having in their vocabulary that post-pandemic sort of feeling. I want my price. I want my conditions. I want to push the market on my absolute top dollar. And we had a lot of failed negotiations because buyers felt their position was stronger. Sellers were still sort of sticking to that, idea that they could get what they wanted, and buyers weren't willing to come up. I don't know if you felt the same way.
Yeah, I did. Unfortunately, we had a few of those instances as well. And, one of the things I was taught early in real estate is sellers set the price, buyers set the value. And a seller can ask whatever they want for that property. It doesn't mean that it's the right price. And again, I guess shameless plugs, right? It goes back to using somebody like yourself, somebody like the Surfing Nosara team in the Nosara area. That's where the value is, and hopefully listening to that expertise, because, I think there's an argument to be made, and most sellers have made it, that let's push it as far as we can. Let's leave a little room for negotiation. That's what we hear commonly, right? But unfortunately, what we've found from the data is that it actually ends up costing you in the end, and you're much better off to price a property according to the current market, which is always dynamic. It's a moving, shifting target. But if you do it correctly, you're not going to lose money. You're going to make money, right? The best possible circumstance for a seller to be in is to have multiple offers. If you price it so high that you're not getting any offers, what are we doing, right? You can't sell a secret. And if something's priced too high, it's a secret because nobody's talking about it. So yeah, I think,
Totally.
and one of the things I think that was really exciting about this year for us, I'm sure you saw it as well, we finally have mortgage products for non-residents, right? For foreign investors who are coming in. That's a game changer.
It is. My personal
You're
game
scoffing.
has not yet
Aaron,
been changed.
Fair.
Yeah, and I'm still waiting to get plugged into this, because I would love to be able to just say to people, this is a market where you can get financing. Have you found a loan product out there with a fixed rate for at least 5 years?
So this is what I'll tell you without, I don't want to necessarily plug anyone, because again, it's always changing, and I don't want to come across as, this is the bank or the product to go with. This is what I've found, and I've put some effort, some time into this. The private lenders have actually pulled back. Seller financing is absolutely still the primary, that if you can get it, that is the way to go. Typically you're seeing better rates. Every time you're seeing a much smoother transaction, a smoother process in getting that financing. And they understand their property. So they already understand the value of what they're putting paper out on, right? So by far still the way to go. Our private lenders who were kind of out there in the game, they've pulled back because of the insecurity in the market. They don't know what's happening, the volatility. We're still, one of the things we haven't talked about, I'm sure we're getting there, is where do we see things changing? And we think that most of our buyers, from what we've heard, it's post-election. They want to see what's going to happen in the U.S. election right now, before they're really jumping. And I think that's one of those, why haven't you started your diet yet? No, tomorrow will be good, right? I think it's a convenient excuse. I think those buyers who are serious, they're buying, they're ready, they're making their moves. But the majority of buyers, I think what's holding the market is definitely that. Let's see what's happening in our primary drivers, which for us, and maybe for you still, is US and Canada, then Costa Rica and Europe. So I think, because of that volatility, our private lenders have pulled back a bit. We do have a couple of private banks, and it's important to note that we're not talking about government-owned banks like Banco Popular. We're talking about some private-owned banks that are international, that have some solid product there for mortgages. Typically, rule of thumb, you're looking at about 2 to 2.5% over what I see in the US 30-year fixed. However, you did clue in on, I think, an important aspect, and most of these products are 3-year fixed with then a floating, moving target on that. However, if you're realistic about your investment, most of our investors do not own for 20 years. And so I think that you can plot this out and you can take advantage of this product.
Totally.
Go ahead.
Well, no, and I think that I haven't necessarily connected with enough clients. There used to be plenty of people who wanted that 3-year note just because they're 62 and they can cash out, X investment 3 years from now, or maybe it's even 18 months that they won't have tax penalties for liquidating X, Y, or Z investment. And so, yes, I still think that the game has changed in that you can get those people who need short-term bridge financing, really attractive products. To me, that the lack of a 30-year fixed product, or something where you feel like you open the market to somebody who's buying with just a down payment and a long-term plan to pay a bank, I still don't feel like we're there yet with the loan products available. Like your first-time home buyer, you know, the ridiculous amount of credit that's available in the US, it still here feels like it's much more of a selective audience.
I completely agree with you. And I think, as I said, we finally have the product. What you just said is completely accurate. We're not there yet. We're not there for the majority of the buyers. But the fact that we now have a non-resident product, and we have a couple of banks who are competing with each other to make that product available, I hope, none of us have a crystal ball, I hope that means that we're going to end up somewhere in the next, let's be conservative and say 3 to 5 years, where we actually have a viable mortgage market. And
Yeah.
you know, it has a real effect. Right now, it has very little effect on our local market, our local real estate market. But I hope that the day will come in 3 to 5 years where it actually does have a large effect. I mean, as I said,
Yeah, if
you know,
that happens, I can move to Nosara.
yeah, right. Well, that's what I was just going to say. We just surpassed 1.5. Come on, you know, cash market. People
I can
show up.
sell
Hey, I
my
have
house.
500,000.
No, I mean, I could sell my house for a down payment on one of those things down there. I mean, no, my average.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah, you're right. It is a blessing and a curse because honestly,
Yeah.
your $2 to $5 million buyers and sellers can be different people, and the transactions can always be more high stakes, stressful, etc. But you know,
Yeah.
sometimes I could use a little bit of that blessing
You're right. They are
myself.
different people, Matt. But I will say sometimes it's easier. Sometimes it's just, you know, you're not dealing with that,
I was gonna
that life.
say.
So this is what I'll say. I do want to just one caveat here, right? Our average sale price, I will say in 2024, I think we surpassed it because traditionally in any real estate market, when there's a cooling process, right? Those people who are investing, who have that liquid, that available income that's not going to put at risk their retirement, well, they can continue to buy. And so, you know, if I'm being fair, if we look at 23 versus 24, those buyers who are still ready to make purchases, who are ready to take advantage of the market, they tended to be looking at a higher end product. And I think that's what's had the greatest effect on our average sales price moving to what it was. We still have product. We still have a number of inventory in that 500 to $1 million range. And hopefully we will for a long time to come.
And I've got product in that 50 to 500 range.
Yeah. Well, we overlap. I mean, you know.
Well, and recently, in my recent history, the two worst, most complicated, long-lasting transactions have been a property for $30,000 that didn't end up closing, and currently a lot that's under contract for 60. That's just like, if we have to do another addendum for this $60,000 lot, every time it just comes up, my head, comes 1 millimeter closer to exploding. But anyway, absolutely. Joe, it's been awesome to talk to you. I really appreciate the time while you are in Italy and you've got so much to enjoy.
Yeah.
Eventually I'll be back down to Nosara and we can run into each other personally. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Absolutely. We'll get a drink. Thank you for having me again. I really appreciate it, Matt. What you do is great. I'm always impressed.
What you do is even greater based on the numbers. Have a good one.
All right.
Oh, wait, let me see. As I say, have a good one, I actually got to get you out of here. Finally, folks, we are headed further south to Jaco in the Central Pacific. We've got my friend David Karr, owner-broker of Coldwell Jaco Realty. I did want to comment on Tamarindo in our local area. Earlier this year, I did get a message from one of my contacts in the lending industry, actually, commenting on the fact that they were getting far fewer inquiries for real estate loans this year than they had in 22 and 23. And I have to say for certain, there has been a slowdown comparing this year to 22 and 23 here in the Tamarindo area and the markets to the north and south. Now, that slowdown is relative to two of the most frenzy-filled years that you've seen in these markets' history. Really, for a lot of people in this area, when we opened the borders following the 21 shutdown, all of a sudden there were so many people coming down to purchase in this area close to Tamarindo. We have the international airport nearby, a growing number of private schools, and all kinds of amenities. That frenzy was reaching a fevered pitch in 22 and 23. 24's slowdown here in this area from January through May. In my interview with David here in a moment, we're going to discuss the percentage that he thinks his market declined. I'd have to agree that you're seeing the throttle come off the Tamarindo market by something like 30 to 40% compared to those frenzy years. However, this is still a very strong market in that the gross volume of transactions that's happening is nowhere near that low volume that you saw in the years following the 2010 crash and really many years after that. Like Joe Gibson in Nosara said, this feels more like 2018 or 19 when once again the market was very strong. We've got lots of buyers visiting Guanacaste. However, it is not what you see right after a pandemic and the reopening of the borders. If anything, I would suspect that in Coco, when Cynthia was commenting on the strength of their market, that's one of the most mature Costa Rica real estate markets in Guanacaste specifically. Coco started developing the minute they opened the Liberia International Airport. You see a lot of older inventory there, and you also see a lot of people who've known about Coco, who have been interested in investing, and really a flow of buyers and sellers that has existed for longer than other places. So I do think that their strength this year has been supported by that historic larger volume of people who are coming in and out, and us newer areas, these emerging places, absolutely saw a marked difference between just how fast things were developing in the years right after the pandemic and 24. That private lender I mentioned said that inquiries for loans were down as much as 50% for his company, and they're taking loan applications from throughout the country. I also spoke, recently with one of my favorite people in Flamingo, and she was talking about the fact that this year, all of a sudden you've seen the change in dynamic from a seller's market in 22 and 3, now really to a buyer's market. And while I don't think that's true in every location, you are seeing that buyers have a heck of a lot more power currently. If buyers are willing to be flexible on location, if they're willing to go inland or away from those prime beach areas, they're able to command much bigger discounts on asking prices now than they were a couple years ago, because yes, you are seeing that shift in the power balance here as we move towards a buyer's market. Now let's bring in David from Jaco and talk about how things are going down in the Central Pacific, in really one of the biggest tourism hub on Costa Rica's Pacific coast, Jaco. You may notice this appears to be a recorded interview, and that would be absolutely correct. For all questions about Jaco, I turn to David Karr, who has more experience in that area than any other human being that I've met. Thanks very much for joining me, David, to give us an update on Jaco.
My pleasure.
So how has it been this high season, January until now, May? What did your market feel like in 24 compared to previous years?
Yeah, so we're still seeing a lot of activity, Matt. We're for us in the Jaco area, we've got a lot of vertical development, a lot of new construction, and we've seen a lot of new product come on the market in this past 12 months. So I would say a lot of the demand and a lot of the buying has been in those projects. A lot of them have even been completely sold out in a matter of 90 days. And we're seeing more projects that are either in the works or coming to the market. And all of these, I think the key for that success and for that demand is affordability. We just have a lot of affordable options. I mean, some of these, granted, smaller condos, simple, just off of the beach, but still affordable, entry prices as high or as low as mid 100s. So that's, you can imagine, attracting a lot of people.
100%. You haven't seen mid 100s condos in our area for a long time. Even talking about properties that are, if we go to Tamarindo as an example, now the buildings outside of Tamarindo, 8 to 10 minute drive out, where you're looking more at sort of long-term rental complexes, those, I'm talking about the Oaks and Las Palmas, you're seeing prices even now with the twos, and it can be very impossible to find, mid ones for sure. What does that 150 and what has that purchased you over the past high season?
Basically a smaller 1 or 2 bedroom, block or two off of the beach, right? We're talking about 700 to 900 square feet, new construction in cases or pre-construction. Now, I think it's important, as people probably, that raises up their radar, right? Oh, maybe that's something to check out. We are, I think, ending that. I think we're getting to the point, moving forward, where I just think that today we don't have much of that left. And I think moving forward, it's just with the costs of the dollar and inflation and construction, I don't think that's going to be replicated. I think this is the final push of that price point. And I think we're getting to the point where we're going to be approaching mid 200s as an entry price point pretty quick.
Yeah, for sure. And that's also just a reflection of the declining value of the US dollar compared to square feet of real estate in Costa Rica, but clearly has a ton of things to do with the construction costs changing so radically, given the colon has just changed so much compared to the dollar. Now, do you feel 24, if you were comparing this high season to the high seasons in 23 and 22, would you say it was 100% as strong, 80%, 60%? Whereabout is your estimate in terms of strength of the market?
Probably 60, 70%. The main difference I would say that we're seeing, there's still volume. The volume is a little bit more spread out because there is more product and there's more people seeking different areas throughout the Central Pacific, not just Jaco, but more of that demand and more of those sales have spread out to Hermosa and Estoril and Bajuco and Herradura. So the total volume there, I don't think has fallen off much. It's definitely not near those peaks. So it's still strong. The biggest thing that I'm seeing is that, and unfortunately, this is the struggle for us as salespeople, is that there was a short time. I've been doing this almost 20 years, and for the most part, people are quite selective. There was a short period, and I'm sure you probably saw it too, after COVID, where people were a little bit more, I'll take it. Thank you, I'll take it. They weren't negotiating. They weren't getting hung up on over a few $1,000s in negotiation. They weren't very selective. They're just like, I'll take it. Now we've gone back to what I've always felt is pretty traditional in Costa Rica real estate, in that buyers are very, very selective, specifically those higher price points. And just in general, people are still there, but they're saying, yeah, but I kind of want this. And even knowing that the inventory is limited, they're still like, well, so it's been harder to close some of these sales because those people are just very, very selective.
That's absolutely, I couldn't agree more. That change in emotion of people coming down, where the motivation was through the roof, the just level of stress that they were going through, or sort of that once in a lifetime opportunity where they felt they wanted to seize the day and just make their dream come true. even though it's a little above their price point and that they need a new water heater, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas, yeah, this past year, you definitely felt that edge completely come back to equilibrium. If you're a prospective buyer out there, you should take heed of this concept. People are absolutely making these decisions emotionally, and shopping for real estate at heightened emotional times can be dangerous to your judgment ability. Just like going to the supermarket when you're hungry isn't a good idea. Anyway, so I've seen that emotional change definitely just knock off the frenzied feel. At the same time, you also had, when the floodgates opened in 21, no one had built anything in our area in many years. It was like all you had at the end of COVID, the inventory on the market was stuff that was the dregs of sort of the recession and then post-recession recuperation years, but no new inventory in our area. Now, as soon as things were that hot in 22 and 3, yeah, you've got construction happening everywhere and volume is strong. You're seeing realtors do fine in our area and move a lot of real estate, but there are going to be a lot of developers who are struggling for the same pool of clients, despite there now being 15 new developments for those clients to pick through. So yeah, I see that happening a ton here as well.
And another trend, and I don't know if you're seeing it as well, I think as the generation has kind of shifted from, back in the day, it was an older generation of buyer that, their preferences and their appeals to the Tommy Bahama, more rustic, more woods, where a lot of that inventory is, and it is still today, especially older inventory. The newer buyers that are a little bit younger now, in their 40s and sometimes even 30s, they're just not having it. They want modern, contemporary design. And if you show them something that's dated, even though they have the ability to remodel it and factor that in their price, they just, and again, that is why the attraction to a lot of the new construction, because they do have the look that they're looking for. So that's something that we're seeing a lot of, and it is making it difficult to move some of that more dated inventory. So
sure. Yeah. I could show you half a dozen Spanish colonial beautiful homes in Hacienda Pinilla that are just completely out of fashion to anybody who is less than 55 now, and even some 55 to 65 year olds come down and say, yeah, I'd rather have something much cleaner, much, so especially because we had this absolute huge boom of Spanish colonial construction here. People need to run and latch on to more of those baby boomer buyers while they're there, because those baby boomers love it. The next generation really want to do that sort of chic beach boho stuff or whatever you want to call it.
Yep, exactly that. Yep, for sure.
Awesome, David. Thank you so much for joining me to chip in your 2 cents on the market here in Jaco. Always a pleasure, and we will be having you back. I didn't have it prepared. David's email address has got to be spit it out here. If you want Jaco Realty,
easy one. David Karr, Karr, Costa Rica @gmail. That's an easy one. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
There you have it, folks. We'll also put that in the description.
Thanks, Matt.
Of course. Have a good one, David.
Appreciate it. Okay.